Good evening, Traveling Molly's listeners and open micers and features from all over, from points as far as Hawaii to Mexico to all over the 48 states. We are, well, 49. Thrilled to have you here tonight for some wonderful features, Phil Mathis and Brian Turner. Just a fine open mic. I am missing my other poetry half tonight, which is Al DeGenova, who had something else he had to do, and left it in the reading in the capable hands of myself and our tech guy, Bill Harrison, for which I don't know what I would do without him. And he also tells me when I forget something, but I'm looking forward to a great night tonight. And we start every night with the hosts reading something, and then we go straight into the rest of the evening. So I'm going to start with something that I think is, I hope is appropriate. Let's see. It's called Whitman v. Hoover. It's from Redactions of Grass is what I'm calling it. And it starts with the epigraph from Whitman. I celebrate myself, sing myself, and what I assume, you shall assume. People I meet, my early redaction, or the ward and city I live in, or the trigger word in its place, the latest dates expunged from the record, discoveries, inventions, societies, authors, old and new, censored. Battles, the horrors of fratricidal war trigger the eyes, they trigger suspicion, the redacted events. These come to me suspect and go for me again. But they are not garbled. Me, myself, redacted. Apart from the pulling and hauling stands. What I am, triggered, redacted, brought in for questionings. Backward, I see in my garbled days where I sweated through code speak, censors, spies. I have no impropriety. I witness expunged propaganda. I white out. I blind. In another section, I believe in you, my soul, and propaganda. The other I am must redact itself to you, and you redact to the other. Censor me on the grass, lock on your throat, not words, not music or rhyme, expunged from the record. Only the lull, the hum of your surveillance. How once we lay such a blasphemous summer morning, how you settled your head athwart my profanity and gently turned suspect upon me, and redacted the shirt from my bosom bone, and redacted your ungodly tongue to my redacted heart, and reached till you felt my wicked, swiftly censored me illegible, that pass all the garbled of the earth. And I know that the word of God is obfuscation. And I know that the spirit of God is communist threat, and that all the men ever born suspect, and the women suspect, and that a redaction of the redaction is redacted and limitless. Our leaves expunged from the field in mossy scabs of the redacted, heaped stones, illegible, white out. A child said, what is the grass? Fetching it to me with full hands. How could I answer the child? I do not know what it is any more than he. Thank you. All right, then. Let's move straight into the Lanny says so beautiful, and that's the Whitman part of it. So let's see where we're going to start with the open mic. How about if we start with Chris? Chris Stewart came back from the first time for the first time in years, and it was a pleasure to hear him. Chris Stewart.
Thanks, Nina. Yeah, I think I had not been to a traveling Molly's since before it was traveling. So I'm happy to be back. I'm going to read two pieces tonight. The first is titled Horace. After his wife died, Mr. Carmelo began collecting broken objects for his yard. 7 chipped concrete powder-coated urns, a half-dozen Romanesque bird baths, wounded statuary of range animals, like the caribou with a jagged scar where his horns broke away. He works at dusk and into the evening by a floodlight that cast a spectral gleam over brick piles and overgrown viburnum. Last week, he propped a cast iron raven atop the torso of a headless Athena. For the neighbors, his Horus was a turn too dark and fuel for small gossip fires. Someone should check on him, caused Mrs. Schweibel. And I say I will, though I won't. He's earned his mourning to fill a quarry of grief with a shrine of salvaged things under the heatful eye of an abiding sky god. Thanks. Thank you. And the second piece I'm going to read is called The Arborist. Outside the psych clinic, the city planted a column of sugar maples in a skinny strip of parkway. I can see these trees from the waiting room, their bony bodies like foals stiffening in the November wind. I am here to see a man about quitting these pills, these days that became decades at a liminal edge between water and air, root and willow. In the seat across from me, a teenage girl with lenticels of scars across her wrists stares down at her shoes. The arborist knows that these trees spread a root flare 3 times wider than the crown. Boxed in by the sidewalk and the curb, should they survive the rock salt and road spray from Mattis Avenue, they will grow to only a fraction of their size. The girl is led through a doorway by a woman in ankle boots and a lanyard that says physician. I hope she is here to ask questions as well. Like, will she be waiting in this lobby as I am in 30 years, root-bound, though assured she's grown? Thank you.
Gorgeous, Chris. I'm so glad to hear from you. There are a few people who I haven't seen for a while. Some people I've never met before. How about if we have Richard Nestor next? Richard.
I'm being unmuted. This poem is called Empathy, but just in the spirit of your point, Nina, I think it might also be called the difficulty of redaction. So here goes. If you put a spoon in a bowl of sugar and move it slowly enough around and around, you'll get an image like the one I've seen on the TV news lately. Or maybe squirting Ready Whip in a hot cup of cocoa works better. I don't know. I'm not Mr. Wizard. But I begin to wonder how small I'd have to be for the sugar surge to whirl me dizzy, or how large before I'd be able to ride out a typhoon and not notice its passing, the way flies ride out whispers. Whatever size I would be my home, as sure as an Eskimo's igloo, or of ice and snow, or a Laplander's hut. My truth, my universe, like my hat size, even though I don't wear hats. I read a brilliant essay once by Stephen Gould about why the 50-foot woman in the movies couldn't be shapely. It was sobering, erotic in its own way, but clearly down to earth. They say the devil is in the details, but the devil may as well be God, ruler of both ends, for all the good imagination does. No wonder justice, with its itty-bitty seed of empathy, is so hard. Thank you.
All right then. Well, since we're on the Nestor screen, Robbie, why don't you read next?
Okay. I have two poems today that are forthcoming in two different journals. I'll start with the short one that's going to be in Whale Road Review. It's called Saturday Lament. Too many things I hoped would last forever disappear. Bumblebees fumbling a field of rosemary. The sun breaks through morning fog, a yellow hammer call of a distant towhee. At the yoga mat, it's the same as any other day, poses probing the groin's stiff clay. Only words come easily, new leaves on the old eucalyptus. The other one is back to my usual mode of narrative, and it's going to be in Swim sometime in April. It's called My Mother, and it has a quotation from Nicole Seeley. You look just like your mother, he says, who looks like a fire of suspicious origin. She looked like a woman, nicely made in her neat turquoise slacks and size 4 shoes, buttons never hanging by a thread, her face bearing evidence of everything she feared, up escalators, finding her way in a strange place, leaving the house. But she was a fire, an earthquake, an electric storm, battering the roof with hail, sending blue balls of light, unraveling skeins of static yarn, rolling across the room. She sent the poltergeist trudging up the stairs, stopping outside my door like a persistent sleepwalker. Most of all, she was a voice, singing, telling stories, teaching me to pin the world in place with words. Each evening, my father climbed the cellar stairs, saying, "Shut up, Lydia. You too, bitch," meaning me. All the power of her words couldn't keep my father's belt from lashing at my legs and back. She spoke less and less, mostly muttering to herself under her breath in 2 languages. I saw it all. I was the message in a bottle, sent into the world to speak her truth. It was my job to plot escape. She filled me with the family lore. Her silence turned her to a force that could not be contained, especially in that small space. The pressure mounting, voice trapped behind her perfect teeth, behind the fear of uttering the unacceptable, the dangerous. How my father's family left us to our fate, wanting to hide the shame, the family madness, truth that everyone could see but didn't want to hear or say. When a woman is stifled for so long, her voice will curdle in her chest and make of her a fire of suspicious origin, smelling of gasoline and melted plaster. Her face becomes a crime scene, evident to anyone who reads the signs, speaking all the outrage of those who outwardly accept their fate. Broken wires spark a conflagration. I must trace the fire to its origin. I am the arsonist. I am the match. Thank you.
Wow. Her face became a crime scene. I love that. I love that. All right, so let's see who's we're going to bring next. One of our people who has not, one of our readers who has not been here before, Tara O'Brien Elliott. Let's hear what you got.
Okay, thanks for bringing me in. Robbie, that was really powerful. Thank you for sharing it. I'm going to read
Thank you.
one piece, and this poem is called The Seam, and it's my tribute to scars. The Seam. The gathering of flesh tightly against itself, the beginning of a seam. When I was a child, I went for a walk in the woods. The mountain laurel blossoms lit up the bushes like the kitschy lights of a 1970s Christmas tree. I cut my arm open, falling off that old zip line there, the one with the red painted seat and wooden handlebars, the one that sliced the mountains in half. The branches cut my skin to lace. After the surgeon mended my brain, there was not a single binding stitch. Thread seal the inside from the out, and instead, surgery was done through my thigh. During a rupture, blood seeps through the mind like ink across a wet page. We lived next door to a Boy Scout camp, and Gordy double dog dared me. I couldn't ride, that rickety zip line down the long and twisted steel cable to the end. After they lashed each arm to its own support, after they ratcheted the blue drape up until I thought that it was sky, I never felt scalpel slit skin. Mountain laurel flowers drop like withered onion skins after the rush of pink fades and autumn's air settles in. They give you a local when they close the wound, and they call it that, a local, as if your wound is simply headed to a bar where it will try to stay sober enough to make the drive home. There were 3 stitches on my upper right thigh where joint connects trunk to leg, body to limb, where they threaded the metal stent up and into my brain, through my femoral, through my carotid, letting the flow of my own blood place the ring that stopped the seeping, the ring that married me to survivor. The black bruising took over a month to heal. In the follow-up, in the checkup, in the angiogram, after they sliced my groin on the table, after they injected my artery with dye blacker than crude oil, after the heat of it snaked up through my brain, hot as coffee, after I watched pitch siphon through my skull shadow on the monitor, my head masking taped to the table so I wouldn't, please don't move, you mustn't move. I felt a flutter of blood between my thighs. I couldn't find my breath. The surgeon called out my name over and over. Breathe, his voice still repeats in my sleep. Over time, some simply dissolve. Others are carefully snipped while trying not to. Please don't. You mustn't move. Not a single binding stitch in my skull. 7 in my left arm from when I fell. 20 when they wrenched my son out of the comma cut above my pelvic bone. 3 in my upper right thigh to stop the bleed in my brain 2 years after his birth. Pink scars fade over time and wither. Fallen laurels, the beginning of a seam. Thanks, everyone.
Wow. I hope you'll be back.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Nina.
I'm going to use that as a way to let people know that if you want to be in the open mic, this is what we do. We take 10 people from whatever requests come in. So toss your hand toss your hat in the ring. And you can, if you know Al's or my emails or want to message me on Facebook or leave a message at the Traveling Molly's reading series and open mic. 1 to 2 weeks before our reading, which takes place on the second Monday of every month. And then we will let you know a couple days before the reading whether if we've selected it. I also want to take a moment to tell you about why we call Traveling Molly's Traveling Molly's. I don't know if it was you, Brian, that asked why the heck it's called that, or somebody did. For years, Traveling Molly's bounced around Oak Park and Forest Park on the outskirts of Chicago. And then all of a sudden we ended up on pandemic time, which is virtual, and it allows us to have people from all over. So they're traveling to us through virtual space, and it has allowed us to have also some of the most marvelous features that this country has to offer. So that's that. Let's jump back in to the open mic with Lynn Fitzgerald. Are you ready to go?
Yes, I had sorry I'm late. I had some trouble signing in, so I'm okay now though. Yes, okay. So the Oscars were yesterday. This is a poem I wrote years ago about the Oscars. So you might catch the references are, you'll see what I mean when I read it. But anyway, it was fun to write, and it's not about the Oscars last night, but it is about the idea. So the title of this is Greco-Roman Oscars, or How One Becomes a Scary Siren. First, it was Gladiator, Now it's Gautier, the glamazon look with pleated robes and togas. No, this is not Animal House, drapey dressing gowns and sandals with leather lacing, absent of the slightest heel. Could it be that Donna Karen is brushing up on Homer? Carolina Herrera on Cicero, perhaps Plautus or Horace? And speaking of Homer, is Brad Pitt's Gluteus Maximus the most enduring image we have now of Troy? Some reading could inform these starlets of impending doom, or at least danger, in the gowns of antiquity. Witness Medea's gift to Glauca of a wedding gown that tears her flesh off, a veil that spontaneously combusts. It might double as a stove. Or Antigone's veil, worn at the beginning of the play, later a noose. The golden dress pins, razors piercing the eyes of the once regal Oedipus, blood coursing down the rivers of his face, the bristles of his beard rotting like an overripe fruit. Or the goddess Hecuba, in her hands the keys to earth, and below, reduced to sorcery, her gown ground to dust before torture became spectacle. In the crown of thorns, the cilice fastened on Mary Magdalene's thigh or Thomas à Becket's hair shirt, flagellating the skin of sinners that they might see the Elysian fields. So, Oscar seekers, one might caution you, a gown could cause a fall, or worse, burn flesh, fall away in dust, and martyrdom is passé. But wounded flesh and scars remain chic, and modeling a dress that shreds while the film rolls could be next. As one would say, caveat emptor. Thank you.
All right then. You again. Timely. And how often do we get to hear about people's gluteus maximi? Maximus. All right. Let's see. How about John Simmons?
Hi, thanks, Nina. John Simon's out here in Honolulu. Since we're inviting controversy, I'm going to read this poem, which I hope I want to apologize ahead of time to our mental health professional who runs this operation. This is a layperson's view of a lot of things which you may not agree with. This poem is called Asylum, subtitled, Give us you're tired, you're poor, you're mentally challenged. We've put up a wall at the border, and we're counting the votes in California for a world that is seeking asylum, a word that now means hope for outsiders, but once connoted confinement, as in Bedlam, Bellevue, or Bats in the Belfry, a place for patients held in restraint, to be drugged or shocked to their calmer senses. People obsessed with compulsions, disordered in seeking escape from their fears, risk dangers of deserts, mountains, and seas, to climb walls or pry open gates leading into our own institutions, hoping for lifetime commitment and praying for maximum security. Barred windows and padded walls, no problem. Quote, call us demented, but just let us in, come the cries of those on the edge. In a nation not sure of its own mental health, the world of our resident inmates seeks its own kind of refuge, from the tensions of tents in the street and shivering street side, shopping cart, shelters, shocking with or without drugs that freeze the mind without freeing souls from their quivering frames. So schizophrenic is our treatment plan that California voters woke last week in a nearly 50-50 split on how to help. Too close to decide. Who knows which way the outcome goes? Borrow $6 billion to buy beds and shelters, or spend what we have to do what we're doing? A divided state is better than no home at all. But can a torn apart nation find room for its left and right brains to share? If nothing else, we've found a way to reunite a word's old scary meaning with the new. Quote, asylum seekers, welcome to America. No sanity test required, end quote. Thank you.
John, was there a quote in there?
A quote, yes. The last one, you mean
Yeah,
well, I had two quotes. One was call us demented, but just let us in is a quote. Not from anybody specifically. And then this last one was a kind of a made up greeting sign.
okay.
Asylum seekers, welcome to America.
Yeah.
First I said no sanity tests required or sanity tests optional. Anyway, I thought that, anyway, just quickly.
Okay, so it wasn't someone whose name we should,
No, it was not
Right.
Sigmund Freud. No, the juxtaposition of the California Proposition 1 near deadlock over what to do about the mentally ill and the homeless, plus our ongoing situation at the border, seemed like a nice conceit. So thanks very much for listening.
All right, great, thank you. And how about next, Susanna Lang? Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to be here. I'm going to read one poem because it's a little long. Grew out of work I did with helping refugees to get settled in Chicago. It's in sections, and the sections have titles that you'll hear. Between here and somewhere else. Khadija, Hafsa, Mariam. They don't need words for this carnival ride high above a pier that was once a wartime base for sailors. These three sisters who fled the war in their own country, far from Chicago, where girls can swing up high, their bright scarves floating behind them, mirrors like miniature suns on their skirts, and the lake wind wrapping its arms around them for the few minutes of their flight. Familia Rodriguez. The bus arrived late from Texas. A family was sent late to the police station. They had been promised shelter. They had been told there would be work. Mother and father, ages not listed. 4 children, 17, 10, 5, 3, still in diapers. Last name, Rodriguez. The lieutenant said it was late. The station was full, wouldn't let them in. Modes of transportation. From Venezuela, it is 2,686 miles to Chicago. They walked mostly. At the end, they swam. Sometimes a governor who did not want them made a bus available. It is 6,965 miles from Afghanistan to Chicago. The government made a plane available. There were days of waiting outside the airport, not knowing if they would be allowed to board, not knowing when the shooting would start. Juan. At the church, we packed blankets, sleeping bags, pillows, boxes of store-bought cookies for new arrivals at the police station. A little boy tucks a bag of cornflakes in with the bedding. His family sleeps at the church, and he eats cornflakes in the morning. But at the station, there is no milk for a child's cereal. What the sisters told me. Before the plane, they drove to Kabul on the Jalalabad road. Sheer rock cliffs, waterfalls crashing to the gorge below, narrow lanes, sharp turns. Only the overloaded trucks slow down. Hafsa says she was scared a little. Not her sisters, they are never afraid, not even here in a new place. But Mariam misses her old school. It was beautiful, she tells me, because she was in it. Mariam in her bright orange dress and pants, her orange scarf, her laughter. Monster. Juan roars at me like a monster, runs with his fingers curved into claws. I have forgotten how to say monster in Spanish. I have forgotten how all little boys act out the same stories, no matter what language they dream in, what names they give to their beasts. From there to here. In Afghanistan, women recite landes, two unbalanced lines, each one honed to an edge. The afternoon of the rides, the girls' lines shortened, silver knives for butter. Not yet home. At the corner of Irving Park in California, a woman holds a sign. We are migrants, please help. One child in a stroller, another sitting on the bench with a coloring book. Migrants, meaning people in movement, meaning not an invading army. More like the swallows already gathering on the fence lines, unsettled. Thank you.
So glad to have you with us tonight. And I'm seeing hearts go up. That's one of the cool things about Zooms. And for those of you on YouTube, one of the other things that I like is being able to see people's comments in the chat, which I can see for the Zoom people, but you're welcome and encouraged to add your own 2 cents, the lines you like, etc. Next up, somebody who's going to be a feature for us in June, Carmen Calatayud, right? Maybe?
Very good. It was great, Nina. Kalatayud. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. I'm going to read a poem from my new book, This Tangled Body, that's coming out in May from Flower Song Press. And this is for both of my parents who were both survivors of war. Wartime world. Dear Paloma, you are my nocturnal witness. We were electric sparklers with dilated eyes on the periphery of the eastern horizon, drifting. After we swam through the sky, I hitched a ride to Neptune, found my family in caves, dead but shivering, killed by colossal crimes. They never found heaven, just kilometers of confusion, methane pools. My clan blown away, but I hold explosions, a waking dream of bodies. Skin hangs from atrophied legs, eyes blind from infrared suns, hearts outside of chests. Corpses, hot and cold, fever in the stratosphere. Paloma, they are not anesthetized. I didn't mean to land on this planet, to see all this. I don't know how to tell you about war, how it splits open buildings and torsos. Brains fall into purgatory, unable to sense the wind. What kind of survival is that? Paloma, I want to come home to you. Let my body make a prayer out of holding yours. I want to pick tulips for you, peruse thick photo albums, and recall the flesh. Forget the blood. Remember how we were cigarettes always lit, young riots every night of the week, celebrating supernovas without a map, dancing to music under guardian moons, sucking on peace before our country cracked. Thank you.
All right, Carmen, you weren't going to read another one, or? All right, then.
Just that one.
All right, thank you. That was great. So then, let's have Lanny Montreal. Lanny has been around in the world of poetry and theater for many years.
Yes, thank you for having me. I just I asked if I could plug my play. It's opening in May. And it's about gun violence and its impact on communities of color. So I hope you can come check it out. It's going to be at the Chicago Dance Theater on Ashland and Foster. I'm just going to share a very short piece. It's actually prose, so it's a short excerpt from my first ever and probably only solo show, which is happening in June. And it's called Anak ni Tapia, Leaving Mother. And this one is going to be at the Lynx Hall. When I was 18, my father cheated on my mother with her best friend. I wanted to tell her, I know what that feels like, my own girlfriend cheating on me with my friend. How I saw them cuddling in the hallway like I was invisible, the hickeys on their necks like some cheater's badge of honor. But I didn't tell her. She would have turned livid at the audacity of a daughter whose queerness she would never acknowledge. Walang makawawasak ng bakal kundi ang sariling kalawang. Nothing destroys iron but its own rust. A Filipino saying. My mother was the Iron Lady. When it happened, I never once saw her cry. She just took all the pictures in the house with him in them and cut or blacked out his image with electrical tape. A few weeks later, she threw herself a big fuck you birthday party at a restaurant and invited all their friends, or at least those she thought were loyal to her. At my mother's deathbed, this woman whom my father cheated her with had the gall to visit. I did not know how to react. When my dad cheated on my mother, I was the one who cried at the party she threw. I was the one with a lump stuck in my throat, choking on the memory of my father's transgression. I was the one who waited day and night for him to come home. My sister said my mother had forgiven this woman, but I haven't. I still remember what that was like, playing everything back in my head when I found out. When did it happen? How did it happen? Wait, rewind. Was that his hand gently stroking her back? Were they laughing together at some private joke while my mom's back was turned? My mother loved her. She came to our house, broke bread with us, went with us to family outings to Pansol, the hot springs capital, where warm water flowed into man-made pools, easing aches and pains. Nothing hurts more than a friend's betrayal, not even a husband's. But it seemed she stayed intact, untouched by corrosion, while I fell apart. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Lanny, did you mention the name of your play? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yes, the one in May is called Panther in the Sky, and it's like I started writing it in 2009, and now it's gonna be a production at the Chicago Dance Theater. And then the second piece is like part of my fellowship at Lynx Hall, which is a solo show, and it's going to be about my mother, who was a famous actor in the Philippines. Okay, so
All right. I'm tempted to ask you all also, but I don't want to take more time about whether there's going to be any choreography with it. And I think the
there's
answer.
going to be live music and there's choreography.
All right, we have one person left in the open mic. Before that, I want to mention two things. One is we really do like to pay our features. We used to be able to pass the hat, and that was like an offer to impossible to pass up for people, and people gave what they could. It's not as persuasive to ask people to go to our it's actually Al's website after hours to make a donation, which we will send to our features. But please do it. And we do have this crazy idea that poets should be paid, because if you kind of figure it down to the number of words and the hours spent in writing and editing and bleeding for their inspiration, it probably does come down to about a penny per word or a penny per poem, I would say. So be generous. Next, oh, and Bill just put the link in the chat for how you can donate. The other thing I was going to mention is that you're going to want to be here next month, second Monday of the month, for Lauren Camp and Major Jackson, two fabulous and poets who've made a difference in a lot of lives. So Ricky Cummings, always glad to have you when you're here. Ricky Cummings.
Hi, Nina, thanks. I'm never here as often as I want to be, so I'm going to read the beginning section of a long piece that I've been working on for quite a while called The Failure Experiment. So I'll just get into it. The indifferentiation of active and passive. I think I'm addicted to truth, to a version of you more human. You ask if I'd ever love, and I say only if she looks like you. But I don't say only if she has your memory of your mother, or only if she chews her lip when she writes, only if she looks like you, the you that still exists when I stop believing in you. No one could explain why the unreal was wrong. Who cares if it's all fake? We're all still here. She says to me, you look misplaced, while I'm talking to Bethany, who had just asked if I believe in heaven or the afterlife, which comes during a section of Flow My Tears when Felix is at a gas station, a part where Philip wrote the book of Acts without knowing it. He lived it then some years later. He wrote it all down, imprints and lines of code. This might be a bit of a long shot, but do you have anything on ontological finitude? I mean, about the limitations of time and space that we've talked about. I don't think I'm here, nor now, and it's starting to bother me. What's stopping me from being everywhere? Or you? The text used for analysis is called the corpus, from the Latin for body. So the question of where is the body is answered on the page. Corpus also gives us the English word corpse, the dead body, the dead text, a study of cadavers that are so well constructed one might never know their reality except through their relation to other corpora. I think I've lost my stomach for poetry that has heart. I'm up to my eardrums in poems about plumbers, about the everyday experience of making soup. Maybe I spent too long ingesting the sorts of views that most people would call majestic, as if there was something new and special about mountains that can be seen approximately everywhere. Don't get me wrong, I love the way the Garden of the Gods glows in the evening before the park service turns the lights on, when the sun catches it just so. But a few miles away is a bunker built to withstand a nuclear apocalypse. And sometimes I just can't really focus on a fucking ant. Too many people think Frost's best poem is stopping by woods while home burial is right there. Maybe this is how I fail my humanity, my eye twitching nervously, writing yet another poem about my mother. Thanks.
Wonderful. And Ricky, you said this was like the prologue to, what is it?
It's called The Failure Experiment. It's a big, long serial poem that's inspired by Jack Spicer and his one-time roommate, Philip K. Dick. So, yeah.
All right then. So that is our fabulous open mic. Our open mics are maybe unequaled, I don't know, but they're still equaled or not. It's among the best. So you should always tune in. So now I just want to give you a heads up that we're going straight into the features, and after the features are done, we're going to have a conversation, Brian, Phil, and myself, which I'm really looking forward to. So we're going to start with Brian Turner, and I'm going to find his bio right now. Brian has 5 collections of poetry, from Here Bullet to The Dead Peasant's Handbook, all with Alice James books, and a memoir, My Life as a Foreign Country, which is on W.W. Norton. He's the editor of The Kiss and co-edited The Strangest of Theaters. He lives in Florida with his dog, the world's sweetest golden retriever, and you're going to have to pronounce it for us. I'm so pleased to have you here.
Thank you so much. That's her name is Denny. She's sleeping right down here for now, so we'll see how long that holds. It's a real honor to get to read in a room full of poets and everybody putting their words in the air. And in fact, I think if you'll indulge me, and I hope I've done justice and haven't put the words in the wrong place, but I got kind of a group poem here listening to you all, and it's called What Am I Redacted? People I meet, discoveries and inventions censored, spies, propaganda I white out. I believe in you. Broken objects, powder-covered urns that cast a spectral gleam. I am here between water and air, an image, and I begin to wonder, my truth, my universe, with its little seed of empathy, bumblebees fumbling a field of rosemary. Only words come easily, bearing evidence of everything, leaving the house, battering the roof with hail. After the surgeon mended my brain, after the rush of pink fades, they give you a local. In the follow-up, after the heat of it snaked up through my brain, I felt a flutter, my breath, fallen laurels, the beginning of a scene. This is not Animal House. Impending doom, a veil that spontaneously combusts, a noose, razors, blood covering down the rivers, or coursing down the rivers, as one would say, caveat emptor. For a world seeking, as in patience, people seeking escape, deserts, mountains, seas, souls from their quivering frames. If nothing else, we've found a way far from Chicago, like miniature suns, scared a little, beautiful, two unbalanced lines, silver knives like the swallows, unsettled. This tangled body, wartime world, nocturnal witness. On the periphery, shivering, explosions, eyes, hearts. I don't know how, unable to sense the wind, I was the one waiting day and night where warm water pooled while I fell apart in the sky, where nothing destroys iron but its own rust. I want to mention two things, an offer too impossible to pass up. I am addicted to love. The you that still exists. We're all still here. What's stopping me from being everywhere? Or you, the dead body, the poetry that has heart? Let my body make a prayer of you. So thank you all for, I hope I did justice by that. Just as a way of saying thank you, you know.
Oh, my Lord, Brian, would you come back every month and do that? Oh, you don't have to.
Yeah, that would be a joy. Yeah, we'd have to publish them after a year, figure it out, and then we'd have to do a bunch of workshops and all kinds of, yeah, that's a whole rabbit hole, I think. Yeah. Thank you all for having me here. I'll warm up the stage a little bit. I can't wait to hear Phil read his work and see what where the conversation leads. I'm feeling in a good mood right now, but the poems I'm starting with here are difficult, and then I think they'll move towards a sweeter space maybe, but they echo off of several of the poems that you all have been reading already. So this one is called The Bodies. The bodies lie along the shoulder of the road. The bodies lie in an ambulance, a truck bed, a stretcher. The bodies are strobed with flaring lights, color of fire, color of night. The bodies rest within the fuselage of a plane at 36,000 feet. The bodies contemplate silence as they wait in the morgue. The bodies are moved from room to room, 1 hour to the next. The bodies are bathed by strangers and by those who love them. They are numbered and recorded with signatures and stamps. They are forgotten by all save those who love them. They are left to the fields, to the green embrace of earth. They are given sunlight and storm, a shadow of wings descending. They are given to rivers, to fire, to ash on the wind-driven rain. They are carried on the shoulders of stone-faced men. They are serenaded with tears, with the instruments of suffering. They are eulogized in great halls and within the confines of loneliness. They are lowered into the ground and into the vaults of memory. They are assembled and disassembled by the steady labor of time. They learn more about compassion as they are lifted in someone's arms. They learn more about the sacred as voices call out around them. They learn more about grieving as their eyes are sewn shut. The bodies are moved from room to room, 1 hour to the next. The bodies are numbered and recorded with signatures and stamps. The bodies are bathed by strangers and by those who love them. The bodies contemplate silence as they wait in the morgue, and they are forgotten by all save those who love them. So I think you'll hear echoes of, Ukraine in here. There's a news story comes in here, and in the book itself or in the poem, it's italicized at one point, and it was in Ukrainian, translated into English by the BBC. And that's, I'll try to gesture with my hand. I'll do the poetry gesture, the hand thing. This is called Sunflowers. What they don't tell you about war is how much a bank ledger might shape a decision tree. The price of fuel, sunflower oil, durable goods when they're floating on an ocean with no delivery in sight. That bullets can skip along the surface of a wall like stones over water. That it's a bad idea to tape the sheet glass windows of your home, but smart to roll down the windows of a car when fleeing a firefight. That you should open your mouth to avoid rupturing your eardrums when a shockwave rolls by. That civilians are the bravest of all. See how they face the invaders, saying, take these seeds and put them in your pockets, so at least sunflowers will grow when you all lie down here. What they don't tell you about war is that a soldier's oath is not only to be the one who puts out the fire, but to be the one who starts the fire to begin with, to be the one who carves a hollow center deep into the word suffering. War is born of the obscene, the disfiguration of words like love or humanity. This much we know. These things we do, these ghosts we live with, how they call out to us sometimes, asking for water, such a simple thing, a glass of water. I wrote this one several years ago, and I was also thinking about Ukraine, but I realized that like many poems that have to do with violence and war and trauma, that these echoes, it's like it's a terrible thing to know you're writing a poem that might continue to be relevant. And as this poem was coming to me, I knew that in the time, maybe that's something for us to talk about later, but this is called 12 Roses for the Dead. The militia kick a soccer ball in the street. Young men, graybeards, rifles, heavy weapons, stories, laughter. Their shivering hands boiling coffee in a tin over a crude fire. The buildings no longer buildings. Landscapes of rubble given to howling when a storm comes in. The ceasefire will be announced at noon, and the fighting will resume until the deadline. A vital rail line must be captured or defended, or perhaps a sympathetic town must be liberated. And high-rise offices somewhere far away, architects design new orphanages, new hospitals, maybe a mausoleum to be placed in the cemetery as a way to honor the dead. There is too much good work to be done. Lists of provocations, demands, diplomatic teams negotiating in distant cities, flashbulbs ringing. And so the militia oil their bolts and check their radios. They smoke their last cigarettes and fall in line. It will take hours to reach the front. Enough time to consider the smoke drifting over the treetops, that grim, dark grove of chestnuts marching toward the horizon before them. And the dead woman lying on the roadside as they pass by. She continues to be dead, perfecting the task, though not one soul stops or offers her the slightest bit of help. I think I don't know if it'll come up in the conversation, but I know I learned something from the amazing poet Dunia Mikhail. It helped me to write that poem, knowing her work. I know there's an influence there. Are you all doing all right? All right. Okay.
Really good.
Yeah. All right. I think I'll shift a little bit to a sweeter kind of space, but this is called Lovers. They kiss the bruised flowers in each other's skin. They moan in a sweet friction of muscle and bone. They flare in blue sparks from the tips of their hair. They transform the grief and pain stored deep in the body. They transpose sheets of cotton and silk into a tablature of music. They drink from the loneliness of and solitude, the quiet of a lifetime. They taste the bright days of summer, the dying leaves of autumn. They write with their tongues over the curving sweep of history. They write with cubes of ice melting in their mouths, cursive by cursive. They astonish themselves with what they discover in one another. They spiral one soul into another, the world vanishing around them. They blur their bodies in a tangle of limbs and hair and fingers and tongues. They ride the animal of pleasure until it shudders through the body in waves. They ride the twin signatures of the Valkyries in their light-encrusted saddles, and they cry out to the gods in the heavens and to the gods within themselves, and they cry out at midnight and in the pealing thunder of an afternoon, and they come with mouths bitten into flesh, a flood of endorphins released, and they come into this sweat-soaked moonlight, the sun-drenched day, and the lovers come until they are made radiant, breathless, wordless, vulnerable, because they are lovers transforming the pain and grief stored deep within the body, because they are lovers moaning in a sweet friction of muscle and bone, because they are lovers flaring blue sparks from the tips of their hair, because they are lovers kissing the bruised flowers in each other's skin. So Sorry, I sometimes I kind of like that poem. It's odd. It's repeats itself in an aphora, but it feels like it goes this crescendo thing and drops down. And but there's a little bit of a preacher there. And I know like my grandfather was a preacher, so I'm like, oh no. It's like the preacher side coming in. I'm like, oh, But the best line in that poem, I think, is they ride the twin signatures of the Valkyries in their light encrusted saddles. And then part of the reason I love it is because I have nothing to do with it. Elise made up that line, my wife Elise, and what an amazing poet. So I lean on her to find a way to the heights of the poem. So this is called Wedding Vows. What they don't tell you about love is that a death certificate has little sway on what happens within the human heart. That marriage, as defined by others, can be both legally relevant and complete bullshit. On Wikipedia, someone has typed the following: Turner married fellow poet Elise Kuznets in Orlando, Florida on September 25th, 2010. They remained married until her death on September 13th, 2016. What they don't tell you about love is that after a loved one dies, people will ask, how long were you together? As if they can't see two within one, the bright vessel of the body in motion, the funeral ship of love, that which the survivor has become, a brightly burning thing, who vowed the starlit amphitheater of the mind, the ancient ocean within, that landscape where memory keeps us all, this body, this home, this housing of the soul. What they don't tell you, because they didn't lean in close enough to hear the words when they were spoken, is that there are many here among us who refuse to repeat the vow until death do us part. There's the passage where I mentioned about Wikipedia. If you go to Wikipedia, I don't recommend it, but if you go to Wikipedia, you would find it's been changed since then. But for several years, that's exactly what was typed in Wikipedia. And I was really offended by it in a lot of ways, but I don't feel it's the author's place to create a public biography or be involved in that process. If that happens, I feel like that's the reader's space, just like I'm a reader too, and I love to be part of that. I love to be a fan, part of that, but I think once we put our work in the world, it has to sink or swim on its own kind of thing, But I mentioned that story in Maine. I was at the Great Mother Conference and up in Maine, and there I didn't know this, but there is these creatures. They're called Wikipedians, and two of them came up to me afterwards, and I don't know if they knew that they were both Wikipedians there, but they separately came up to me and said, "Hey, I work at Wikipedia, and I'm happy to go in there and change it for you." And they were in very different specialties there, like microeconomics and stuff like that. And I said, well, I said the same thing I just said to you about, I don't feel that's the author's place, kind of thing. But I have a feeling one of them went in because it's been changed since then to something that's it does feel more comfortable for me.
Brian, how many legs Wikipedians have?
These had two each, so they seemed like humans. So
were they more like humans or Valkyries?
Well, I only saw them during the daytime, maybe at night. I don't know. There could be a change or something, or when the loons call out over the lake in Maine, that's probably when it happens. You see them in their true form or something, I don't know. They were very kind, very wonderful people. Yeah, so I'll probably read a couple more poems here and then we'll hand it over to Phil. This one's called Vigil. When I think of my father in the ICU, intubated, with whole decades of our lives tunneling in, as I tried to give voice to the last words ever, and language failed me completely. It's his expression that comes to mind, such tenderness, such compassion. There's so much my eyes have seen that my hands have done, and yet I know almost nothing. How many losses will it take for something like wisdom to set in? How many doorways into the sublime need to open for me to fully inhabit the wider landscape of the soul? There's no false humility in this, just one human being looking inward and remembering my brother's voice on the phone, that last call after a year of chemo and the doctor's death sentence coming due. My brother saying, "You don't even know how good a glass of water tastes." And of course, he's right. I light the candles as each anniversary arrives for Elise, for my father, for my brother, votive candles for uncles, grandparents, friends long gone, my mother now who just passed away in October. Each an act of memory, devotion, lament. I watch these figures move into the Buddha's statue, how they sway to the teardrop of light pooling in a well of beeswax. Do they band around me to summon and relive their time on earth? Or are they here to help me on my way in this slow crossing of mine, the small deaths I usher in each day, as the dead whisper all that must be done, gesturing me toward them, saying, "It's okay, it's all right. There is no dying of the light. There's only this shimmering dusk, this gathering of souls into the deep shadow of a mountain." And then maybe one last poem here. I'm sure many of you know this story about. I think his nickname is Lawn Chair Larry. Does that name ring a bell? A guy down in L.A. who took those weather balloons and like a lawn chair, and then launched himself out over the Pacific for a bit, right? So he shows up. When I was researching him, I found he's not the only one to do something like this, and there was another person in Japan who did that. So that person will also show up in this poem. So you'll get a bit of both of them. It's called Paper Lanterns. We lift our hands into the banded light at dusk and let go, as each lantern wobbles on the air before the invisible carries it into the heliotrope of twilight. It is something to see this quiet fleet of prayer rising into darkness. And it's not unlike the weather balloons a man once filled with helium tethered to a lawn chair, a fragile airship he built to enter the sublime, ascending into the atmosphere before floating over the Pacific at 15,000 feet. In Japan, Yoshikazu Suzuki followed his lead, departing from Lake Biwa, where I once stood before the gravestone of Matsuo Basho, hoping it might help me in the creation of my own haibun. I have no way of knowing what Suzuki may have been thinking. He was last spotted 500 miles out over the ocean, never to be seen again, though I imagine him still up there, coasting on the trade winds, witness to the sun and moon, clouds pluming into great anvil heads of rain, nights stunned by tree-shaped voltages of lightning. And just as Suzuki begins to despair his solitude, slow-moving flocks of light rise up to greet him. All our earthly prayers, sent from the midnight shores of our lives, and Suzuki, an old man now, drifting over the curving sphere he knows by heart, cries into his weathered hands, cries at the sweetness of it all. So I thought I might end with a prayer and all of us sending some light up to those who need it desperately. So, if not for ourselves too, right? Yeah. And I thought it'd be a nice gesture to have a prayer and sort of send a prayer aloft on a wobbling lantern that Phil might pick up and continue with the light with. So looking forward to it, Phil.
It's wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. Another round of loud or silent applause or visible applause. That was just beautiful. And now we have Phil Metris, whose books include Fugitive/Refugee, which is, you'll have to tell us whether it's already out or if it's on its way. Ochre and Rust, new selected poems of Sergei Gondlevsky, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Shrapnel Maps, The Sound of Listening, and Sand Opera. His work has garnered fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, Lannan, the NEA, and the Ohio Arts Council. He's received a host of prizes, including Adrian Rich Award and 3 American Book Awards. And I'm just going to skip through this. And he's a professor of English and director of the Peace, Justice, and Human Rights program at John Carroll University. So thanks so much for being with us, and I'm ready to go, and we're all ready to listen.
Thanks so much, Nina, and thanks uh, to Bill as well for helping out with the tech, and thanks to Brian for the lovely suite of poems. I heard a bit of almost like maybe some Bly in there. And what's so cool is that Brian's been writing so long that his early fame for Here Bullet is now like sufficiently in the past that we can appreciate him as a poet, not simply as a war poet. You've well outdone yourself at this point, and you've become totally mystical as far as I'm concerned in every way, shape, and form. And thanks to all of our open mic readers as well. It's great to hear your work. Yeah, so the book is not officially out, but of course I have a copy, and here's an image of it. I actually made a little poster of the book cover because I love this image so much. It is an installation, an image from an installation by Chiaro Shiota, called The Key in the Hand, and the new book, which I'm going to read just maybe just two poems from, and I hope that's not a disappointment. Uh, um, is concerned with the problem of human migration and the quest for home. And I know that Susanna's work and poems also dealt with that as well. So I'm actually going to read the first and the last poem around two poems that are sort of dealing with what's happening in Gaza. And I just feel the need to try to say something as best I can. So this first poem is the first poem of the book, Fugitive Refuge. It's called Plague Psalm. And just to sort of touch hands with Brian's own prayer poem, I love a good invocation poem, and this poem emerged as a result of kind of playing with the Hebrew Psalms during the period of lockdown, when we were all sort of locked in our own places and trying to understand what that moment meant. Of course, in some sense, it represents our own moment, even though we're not quote unquote sheltered in place anymore. So this is called Plague Psalm 40. I wait in the waiting room of my room for you, dear doctor, to lean down and listen to the weird music in my chest. Draw me out of the mire of terminal detention, renewable distress. I'm surrounded, suffocated inside a gated state. The wind scribbles invitations, only tethered branches answer. Maestro, steady my starlings. For you, I hunger. Lift your baton and stuff my mouth with singing. This period, since October 7th, has been particularly painful for so many people. And as someone who actually published a whole book trying to wrestle with the questions of Palestine and Israel, the book Shrapnel Maps, and really been working on justice and peace issues in the Middle East since the late 90s, this has been an absolutely devastating time. And poetry does not come easily to the grieving. But I tried to do the best I could, writing a poem that kind of came out sideways because of an assignment someone gave me to write a poem with a title "To Go on One's Way" after the Aramaic word yazil. And this, so this poem sort of takes us to that moment sort of in late November, kind of a month into the current violence. Now, if people don't want to hear these poems or just need time away, just please take care of yourself. I don't think this poem has too much hardship in it, but the next will, certainly. To go on one's way, after the Aramaic word yazil. Before the peace pull we gather, peace in a dozen tongues, a flutter of hands, the wing this word we want to make in the absence of the world. where I and you translates to we, where we arise and go, walking a wide diameter of grief. Inside is an open field we see but cannot enter. Without words we walk, cradle shared sorrow. Are we always too late? The world is a narrow bridge, and the important thing, as we walk the abyss that is in us, is us. Rabbi Nachman says, the important thing is not to be paralyzed by fear. Clouds descended to earth, not fog this, but not rain either. A kind of impossible meeting, to arise and go on our way, to find one foot before the other. If pain cannot be housed, we must circle its circumference. Walking, it's said, is a series of controlled falls. We fall and fall again. When Isaac Jogues failed to find his friend's grave, he declared the whole ravine a reliquary. Everywhere he stepped could be his friend's body. The whole earth is reliquary. Elsewhere, under the same sky, is crying metal, converting buildings to rubble. How to find the tongue beneath the tongue before it split at the root. I walk inside the number 40, years and days counting one by one. In those days he went out to the mountain to pray, the verse says, and all night he continued in prayer. Some forests are countries of fire. In the middle of the ocean, in the middle of an open-air seaside prison, some drink when thirst begins to burn the undrinkable sea. Some love what they cannot see is prison, one foot before the other. So many photographs, digital iconostases we hold in palms, victims of victims. Under the bombs we walk, under the bullets, under the rubble. We walk unable to reach the hurt place. Inside the technology of vengeance, of fear, whole family trees uprooted. No, evaporated. Prayed away all night, even when it is day. We go on our way without. Some images are paths, some are dead ends. We are crazed and cracked vessels. The Lord has poured so many tears in us, our faces can't hold them. The path is grief, the destination unknown. To say salam is to say shalom, is to wish wholeness upon another the world otherwise fails to offer. We offer up our emptiness surrounded by emptiness, our open palms lifted to emptiness. The Imam says the everlasting peace is from you, God, and returns to you. One footstep for self, one for kind. The rabbi says, may it be your will, I lie down in peace and rise up in peace, one for self. Peace I leave with you, Jesus said, my peace I give to you. Like that, we lean into future, pray all day, even when it is night. God, what is this silence, this infinite well? There is no bottom. Arise and go, Micah says, for this is no place to rest, this present tense. God, what is this silence? God, the silence. We walk on our own path, beloved names still on our tongue, no place to put them. Our cracked lips part, filling with this sea, this ocean we open with our mouths. This may be, I'm going to have to sort of take bits of this because it's too long to read the entirety of, but it's called Dispatches from the Country of Erasure During a Genocide. And many of the quotes are drawn nearly verbatim from South Africa's application for proceedings on genocide submitted to the International Court of Justice in January of 2024. So Article 2 of the Genocide Convention states, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. A, killing members of the group. B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. D, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. Or E, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Okay. 1. On October 9th, 2023, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant in the Israeli Army situation update advised that Israel, quote, was imposing a complete siege on Gaza. No electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting animals and we are acting accordingly. 2. On October 31st, when asked why he was not fleeing the north of Gaza, Dr. Hammam Alo responded, "If I go, who would treat my patients? We are not animals. We have the right to receive proper health care. You think I went to medical school and for my postgraduate degrees for a total of 14 years, so I think only about my own life and not my patients?" 2 weeks later, he was killed in an Israeli airstrike. 3. By the end of October, it was estimated that 6,000 bombs per week had been dropped on Gaza. By December, Israeli military attacks had wreaked, quote, more destruction than the razing of Syria's Aleppo between 2012 and 2016, Ukraine's Mariupol, or proportionally the Allied bombing of Germany during World War II. 4. The destruction wrought by Israel is so extreme that, quote, Gaza is now a different color from space, a different texture. 5. Gauze, in one etymological positing, is at the root connected to Gaza. A center of weaving in the Middle Ages, Gaza was known for its fine silk, gauze in Arabic, that was imported into Europe. That delicate covering now used to stimulate wound healing. 6. On January 29th, it was estimated that over 1,000 children have had at least one leg amputated since the bombings began. 7. Did I take the time to walk a little outside during the genocide? Did I phone an old friend, remember the old days, and catch up on the new during the genocide? Did I share a kind smile with strangers on my way to and from work during the genocide? Did I see Amina Ghanem, 13-year-old girl, her black irises seeming to crowd out the white, in her gray Adidas hoodie and blue surgical mask, the blue star clip in her black hair? Did I see her tell the journalists, "We were sleeping and we heard the sound of tanks when they came and drove over the caravan in which I, my father, and my brothers lived. The tank squeezed us inside the tin all night until the morning. And when they took us out, I found that my father and my little sister had been killed." Did I take a deep breath and count to 10 when I became angry during the genocide? Did I keep watching those black eyes whose blackness beyond the iris was not iris but blood vessels broken, and those dancing hands as they gestured the flattening of the tanks over her family in her tin hovel during the genocide? Did she remind me of my daughter? Did I text my daughter to check in on her when she was struggling at school with the fact that she wasn't allowed to stage a walkout during the genocide? 8. Did I remember that the genocider was also genocided, and what preceded the genocide was an attack that brought back memories of the genocide during that genocide? How could I forget? 9. In November, my daughter tried to mobilize her diversity council at her high school to do a walkout and day of mourning for Palestine. The school said, no, it's not a good time. Why did it take attacks by Hamas for people to pay attention? Is it possible we only understand the logic of violence? 10. In November, I received an email from the DEIB office at my university stating that I was the subject of a bias report because of my social media posts, one of which stated, "From the river to the sea, let every precious life be free." This student believed I was wishing for the death of Jewish students. Let every precious life, precious life, life. 11. With the murders of Palestinian journalists and poets, what can poetry do? Poetry's durability is sometimes in proportion to its belatedness. Poetry is often a practice where first thought is not the best thought, not even the final word. But poetry's belatedness hauntingly echoes international law's belatedness when it comes to defining genocide. Calling any event a genocide, particularly when unmoored from legal definitions of genocide, has become the go-to politicized moves of attention grabbers. And yet, what if calling an event a genocide can prevent the further unfolding of a genocide? 13, I'm going to skip ahead. Pastry chef Masoud Mohammed al-Khattati was killed in an Israeli airstrike on his house on November 3rd, 2023. His shop's motto was, "Let the poor eat." He had a reputation for giving away the popular Palestinian treat knafa to indigent customers, earning him the nickname of Father of the Poor. 14, on 10 November 2023, the Israeli Minister of Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, clarified the government's position in a televised address, stating, "To be clear, when we say that Hamas should be destroyed, it also means those who celebrate, those who support, and those who hand out candy. They're all terrorists. They should all be destroyed." 5 days later, on November 10th, the US vetoed the first UN resolution for immediate ceasefire. By January, many people in Gaza had resorted to eating animal feed, mixing it into flour to make a bitter bread. 15, in early November, my daughter Layla tried to get her school to do a day of mourning for Israel and Palestine. The school said, "No, it's not a good time." She resigned from the Diversity Council. Now she knows, I thought suddenly, what it's like to be Arab American. 16, in December, I learned a new term, shadow ban, when a social media user is muted by the platform without informing them. On December 8th, only one rescue vehicle was reported operational in the whole of Gaza, with survivors forced to try to dig for survivors with their bare hands. On December 8th, the UN vetoed the second UN resolution for an immediate ceasefire. 17, it's not enough to share the poetry of Hida Abu Nada or Rifat al-Arir, much less Mahmoud Darwish. It's not enough to publish Palestinians, though they should also be published. Palestinians want to go home, and we, the citizens of this empire, are funding the attempt to make that impossible. 19, Mossab Abu Toha, the Palestinian poet from Gaza, wrote, "Humans, my family are telling me they don't have wheat flour or rice. There is not enough food. Please help." 20, did I savor each bite, or did I scroll through my phone and fog eat during the genocide? Did I remember to floss my teeth each night despite my fatigue during the genocide? 21, on February 20th, the US vetoed the third UN resolution for a ceasefire. Did I tire of reading posts about the genocide during the genocide? I did. Was I watching my weight during the genocide? I tried. Did I say when I saw the girl who made Cinnabon during the genocide, "See how resilient they are, they will survive" during the genocide? I did. Did I stay hydrated during the genocide? 23, there are now over 120 mass grave sites, not 120 graves, 120 grave sites. Did I worry about the shadow on my father's CT scan during the genocide? Did I see the bodies wrapped in white lowered into the hole during the genocide? Did I bathe enough and shave enough during the genocide? I'm going to skip ahead here. In January, when I printed out the names of the dead children of Gaza, it came out to 100 pages. I flipped through them, looking for names I knew. On the final page, it read, "This is half of the dead children." Can I say how much I love Students for Justice in Palestine? Can I say how much I love Jewish Voice for Peace? Can I say how much I love Rawi? Can I say how much I love Jewish Currents, Writers Against the War in Gaza, the Palestine Youth Movement? Can I say how much I love the students at Brown University who went on hunger strike, trying to get their university to divest? Can I say how much I love Aaron Bushnell, who could not bear the brutality he was asked to bear, who became a pyre of flame crying, "Free Palestine"? Can I say how much I love you who overcame your fear, who overcame the trauma, who defied the rules, you who spoke up, you who pestered your reps, you who shamed city halls, you who walked out, you who disrupted the ugly peace of empire because others could not? "33. Did I learn to accept what I cannot change during the genocide? By the 7th of November 2023, 312 Palestinian families in Gaza had lost over 10 members each. The level of mortality in Palestinian families is such that the medics in Gaza have had to coin a new acronym, WCNSF, meaning Wounded Child, No Surviving Family. 34, have you called your congressperson? Have you retweeted, reposted, storied out the content, or did you wonder how you would look retweeting this thing that made you uncomfortable during the genocide? But I prayed during the genocide. I prayed for the hostages. I prayed for the prisoners. I prayed for the living and the dead and those in the middle. But I fasted during the genocide. I chalked sidewalks. I called Congress, but I led peace walks. But I awoke in the middle of the night from uneasy dreams. I kept going to work during the genocide. I graded poems about paradise during the genocide. I asked the students not to forget that even as they write their version of paradise, to write it against the backdrop that there is suffering in the elsewhere, even if it seems to be a distant dream, that even in paradise, we will remember. 36. Did I start using the heart emoji more during the genocide? Did I remember that there are those who survived genocide? Will the genocide survive the genocide? 37. At her high school in March, my daughter is reported to have written in chalk on the sidewalk, "Save Gaza," and "Ceasefire now," and "Free Palestine." We received an email stating, "We are planning to connect with her tomorrow about this to let her know that that's not an action that is permissible on campus right now." 38. What is permissible right now? Did I wake up rested during the genocide? Did I remember my dreams? Did it even happen, the genocide? She wrote, "Save Gaza, ceasefire now, free Palestine, not an action permissible right now." Am I dreaming right now? I am waking up. Save Gaza. Are you waking up? Right now. Good morning, ceasefire now, good day, right now. We're dreaming, good night. Let's get to work. Free Palestine. I think I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Brian. Everyone give them a round of applause, 3 rounds, maybe even. Bill is going to start setting us up so that we can all see all 3 screens. And hey there. You can all unmute yourselves. I wrote down, I mean, there's so many thoughts and feelings that came up for me as you were both reading. And the words that came to me most with greatest strength were that which connects us. That which connects us. Because that's what ran through both of your readings, just the humanity. And I'm just thinking, Phil, of how you reference so many genocides and our relationship to them. And there is not just one genocide, but in many ways, they're all the same. But what we have right now is what is right now. That which connects us. So I think I want to start our conversation by asking how you came to this reading tonight, what feelings, thoughts went on for you, inspired you. were part of your considerations in what to read or what not to read? Or
Yeah. You know, in the world of you know, our small world of books of poetry, I should be promoting my new book, but all I can think about is what's happening in Gaza, you know, like, so it just seems kind of insane. So yeah, I unfortunately have felt quite overcome and overwhelmed by this particular historical moment. Seeing war so closely, and knowing that we are implicated in it, is profoundly undoing. And so I don't know. So I wanted to share both of those poems. The first poem is kind of like my peace poem, and the second poem is like my justice poem, I suppose. And I think that we kind of need to hold each other in, you know, our faces together, you know, in proximity. I mean, that's all I would say, is that I just I wanted just to I read that last poem at AWP, and I did not keep my shit together, and I did not keep it again this time. But it's just something I felt like I had to read. And it was so great to hear the range of poems that you shared, Brian, which I always want to try to keep that balance between recognizing that the horrors of the world are not the final word of the world, that there is love, that there is beauty, there's joyfulness. And so I appreciate the fact that you kind of you sort of offered us both.
Yeah, as you're talking, and as you're reading too, I was thinking the one thought, and this is drifting back quite a ways, but when the hostage situation happened in Iran when I was a child, I remember going to school. I was in middle school, and I remember seeing this kid had this T-shirt. It was a white T-shirt, I think with the sleeves cut off. I'm not sure, but it was a white T-shirt, and he'd written with a big marker. It said "fuck Iran," right? He's like 13 years old. Like, you can't do that, you know? Nobody said a word, like anger and hate. You can, if you're pissed off and angry, people will allow even a 13-year-old kid to have that kind of space. But if you're mourning and hurt and you're trying to like call out with a conscience to change some pain, like, why is it we don't keep space for that? As you're talking about your daughter and that kind of thing in school, and like it just we have, and this is drifted way too far, but like it's structurally built into the system too. Like, if you look at the houses of government, we have a Department of Defense, but like there's no Department of Peace, you know?
Yeah.
So we don't have to use the Department of Defense so often. Okay. Maybe like it's like we have to create whole new way of thinking. But and it's these are some of the things I was thinking of as you're reading. But what a profound poem. And all of those, the plague, was it Plague Song 40? Is that what it's called? Yeah.
Yeah.
Opening. Yeah. So yeah, and there's a few. Yeah, right now I'm just kind of stunned into silence a bit, but complicity is one of the words that comes to mind. I suppose I was told years ago, long before I was ever in the military or wrote poems about any of that, because I was talking about my father's alcoholism and some poems I was writing, and I had a conference with a teacher who said that one of my touchstones was complicity. It was one of my foundation stones as a writer. And I was intrigued by that, and it seems to be one of the things over my life. But I also like look outward and I look at like the country I'm in, and as you say, we're funding like the taxes we pay and all this is funding what's happening right now. We're it's not across the globe, and oftentimes wars seem far away, so we can sort of divorce ourselves from there, feel separate. And then the other part that I thought about with your reading, Phil, is like there's this other type of complicity that's unavoidable if you're in a life and you're trying to like, you got to pay your mortgage and your kid's going to school, and like my dog needs food, you know, she's the sweetest, world's sweetest golden retriever, and I'm gonna make sure she gets her food. But my God, there's people drinking salt water and don't have food. A little bit of food is being dropped by parachutes in the sky, you know?
Right.
And like that's the best we can do, you know.
Yeah.
Where's the Berlin airlift?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Any particular thoughts, Brian, that you brought with you into tonight?
Well, one of the thoughts was is I didn't know exactly what Phil would read, but one, I know that he's a man of great faith. I don't know if we share exactly this in the Venn diagram. There's some overlap, you know, and but I wanted poems that would speak that way. But also having been a soldier, this idea of complicity, so that's why I read that poem Sunflowers, because it was talking about how soldiers, you know, and also I know I'm talking about in that poem and the two poems I read that had to do with three that had to do with connected war, were really referencing Ukraine. But they, you know, as I was reading Sunflowers, for example, it was talking about how soldiers carve a hollow center into the word suffering, you know? And I was thinking about how, and then the other one it talks about the militia oil their bolts and check their radios. But the echo there is of Israeli soldiers, in my own experience too, but these occupying forces as they're about to do the things that they do, you know, that these are happening in real time, like right now, you know. As we're speaking right now, there are units oiling their bolts of their weapons and checking their water in their water bags and stuff. And you know, so I knew that ahead of time. And so I was thinking about that and putting the poems together. But I did want to like sort of lean towards towards a sweetness and love. But that doesn't mean I think it's important to note that like a poem that might be talking about conflict of war and trauma, things like that. If its ink isn't dipped in the reservoir of love, if we aren't drawing the words from there, then poems that are talking about war, they're like it's like pornography or something. It's not. It feeds into a vicarious pleasure for some, or becomes propaganda, or the whole variety of issues with that kind of thing. But I think a real war poem is dipped in the well of love, even though if it's hard to see on the surface of the poem, you know, if that makes sense.
I love that.
You know, the idea of that which connects us returns to my thoughts. And I was, as you were speaking, Brian, I was also thinking about Phil, you and your daughter, and to compare that the feeling that you have in your relationship with her as it plays as this genocide is playing out. I thought about a stand-up comic, John Leguizamo. I always get him wrong, and Bill will probably help me at this point because he does an hour on, Bill, help me, what's it called? Something like an idiot's guide to do either of you know what it is?
That's a great special. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's in it, he is kind of reckoning with his son and his son's experience of who are his heroes going to be. And here's this child who wants heroes and is not finding them in his own among his own people, and he's a child. And so it does ask us what sense are children making of what's happening in the world, and what examples are we being handed in what people see through the news and through, their communities. I don't, any thoughts about that?
Well, I'm moved by how young people want adults to be accountable for what seems absolutely inexplicable, irrational behavior. And so I'm grateful for the moral clarity of youth, such as it is. And my daughter and I actually wrote a very, very long letter to the school saying, like, it's important for you to do the job of education of your students, because failing that, having an opportunity to reflect and to encounter and to deal with difficult subjects, they will receive their education from social media, from TikTok and Instagram. And at the very least, they need spaces where there is, as Brian said, care, love. They need to, dip their pens in love, in the inkwell of love, and care. And because there's so many people ready to manipulate all of us, and it's happening all of the time. So actually, I don't think she needs a hero. She is her own hero. We are the ones we've been waiting for, as June Jordan once famously said. But she didn't mean me. She meant my kid.
Yeah, there's an echo there for me. I went to Baghdad in 2011 to do a piece for National Geographic, and I went on to the University of Baghdad, the campus, and it wasn't announced. There was no meeting set up with anybody. We just wandered on the campus. There were some students sitting outside on this like a picnic table, and they most of them spoke English, so I didn't have to. There was an interpreter with me, but we didn't really have to. And I asked them many questions, but among them, one of the questions, and I asked the same question. There was like a hookah shop further downtown, and we went there, and I met with two students who they're no longer students, they just graduated, and they were dentists. They were unemployed dentists, and they were smoking hookahs at the shop. So in both places, I asked us the same question, and I remember what their childhood was like, you know. And they said, and in both of them, I had almost the same response, which was, they were in the word you said, Phil, when you said about being angry at adults, and they were angry like everybody who was older, people like myself were part of the military, but just everybody was older, And he said, they said, I never got a childhood. They got a childhood, and I never got one, And it's just so profound, And so I kind of sometimes I feel like I've said for many years, for the last 15 years, I've said that sometimes my work about the Iraq War, I felt like was a placeholder until the children in Iraq became old enough, if they survived, and if they found the language for it, and if somehow it translated in English so that I could come across it, I learned about the war that I was in much more than I thought I knew about it. And I've said that many times. But the problem is that's too much weight to put on those kids' shoulders, Why should they have to educate us, Like, my God. But I guess we don't even, I mean, we can just learn just by watching a child have their leg amputated, Maybe is that what it takes for us to learn?
No, that's not enough, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, like, what makes it stop?
Yeah. And obviously,
Yeah.
this isn't enough. And it should be. It should be. So here's the last question I want to ask each of you, and that is, what would each of you like to ask the other?
Oh. Well, I mean, if we're being like just real and practical, be like, when's the next time we can have like dinner together? So they talk a lot longer too.
Well, I'm going to be in Mexico until April 17th. So why don't you all come down to San Miguel? It's just heaven.
My goodness, that is a nice invitation, I have to say.
So yeah,
Well, Phil, I would have one is a very practical, just sort of poetry kind of question. But I love the translations you've done. I'm just wondering, do you have other translation things that are maybe down the road or something you're thinking about doing that you don't mind sharing?
Sure. I've been working on translations of a sort of former teacher of mine, a translator and a poet from Russia. Um, and what I like about his poems is they're kind of deliberately archaic, somewhat funny, but also deeply religious. Not in a sort of um, from an institutional church perspective, but in that way that so much Russian poetry can be, sort of suffused with a sort of idea of infinity or divinity. And his name is Dmitry Psurtsev. Just a piece came out recently at where did it just come out? I don't know. It's an impossible name to spell, but I'll throw it in the chat here. Last name is Stewart. First name Dmitry.
I would just say, я говорю по-русски плохо, извини. But I really admire also that you're translating Russian writers, because we live in this time where, Ukraine and Russia are fighting, but
Sure.
again, there's so many hundreds of millions of Russian people, and demonize the word animals came up earlier, and there's this way of dehumanizing a whole people, and I think it's important for us to find ways to fall in love with people. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I felt a little ashamed about publishing that book. It came out in October, the Gomlevsky book, Ochre and Rust. I felt like who wants to read a Russian, much less a Russian man, a poet,
Yeah.
somewhat patriarchal in nature. And I just decided, it is what it is. He actually left Russia after the invasion of Ukraine. He was so furious about it. He's in exile now. But the point is, as you say, Brian, there are beautiful humans and everywhere, beautiful poets everywhere, and their country of birth was an accident of history. It was not a choice. So many people in all of these places that have been benighted or beset by all manner of tragedies and horrors. They're there. We could have been there, and it turned out we weren't. So, yeah, I appreciate that, Brian. So, can you tell us a little bit about the publication of this this triad of books, and sort of like how that came to be, and how you think of the books as a conversation with each other, and why did you think of it in three and in a sort of triad?
I called my editor. I was in Nebraska, and I was in this middle of this town square, and I called her. We were talking on the phone, and I said, I've got these 3 manuscripts. I said, yeah, sometimes I know if we're lucky, a poet dies and then maybe they make like a box set. And I said, could we do it before I die? But that doesn't really answer the question. And she was kind enough to consider it, kind of thing. And so I think it's the work of a lot of years combined together. And then just to make it nuts, there's 3 books of poetry, and then each one has an album of music inside of it. And then each one also on the back cover has a 3-part video monologue where like I come up from the ocean and start talking to the reader, about love and loss and stuff like that. And then I think in the second one, I'm sitting right where I'm sitting now, and I start talking about trying to communicate with ghosts, because there's a period of about 5 to 8 years where pretty much the whole core of the closest family and friends that all the people I love, that core group, they all crossed over, and my mother just went in October, so it sort of almost finishes up the whole thing. So I feel kind of like marooned now a bit, but I'm living with the dead, and I'm like, I love, they're alive inside of me, but like, and 2 of them, my wife Elise and my best friend who's like a brother, Brian, the one that's the glass of water that I mentioned earlier, um, they're both artists, but like Elise had a book come out and then a posthumous book. But if you talked to her in the last year and a half of her life or so, she'd have told you she was she was really upset in so many ways, but one was because she felt like as an artist, she was just coming into her own. And if you read her first book, the last poem of that book signals a kind of a change. You can see a stylistic change that has much deeper implications, and she knew that, and she was well aware that her next book she was going to discover things, and so I'm trying to figure out ways to be in conversation and collaborate and have their voice. The whole basic premise of it is that I want people to fall in love with some of these people I love, so that they might live on in the world, But it starts out with one book it's a you conversation with Elise, but also kind of talking about climate change at the same time as she's dealing with cancer. And then the next book sort of goes further out into these other losses I was talking about. And the last book shifts into like the poem about sunflowers that I read tonight and the lovers and things like that, where it gets sort of further away, but then near the end it circles back. So it's a little bit like a snail shell. It just kind of goes further and further out, but it kind of comes back in on itself. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's kind of what it.
Oh, thanks for, yeah, for sure.
This is a conversation that is just beginning at a time that it has to end. But it's also a conversation whose beginnings go back so very far, and we're just a snippet in the midst of it. But by way of a wrap up, I do want to say, in response to Phil saying that he was more focused on the genocide. Oh, where did they go? Oh no, are they
We're all
here?
here. We're all here.
Okay. What was I going to say? That we'd like you to put the name of the book that you would most like people to buy into the chat. And so people do know. And I want you all to know that the recording of this reading will be going up on YouTube before the night's over. And I hope that you and any and everyone will share this, both the reading and the conversation. And by the way, a fabulous open mic where people, I think, were anticipating what the two of you were going to be addressing in this reading. So it's there. Share it. I hope to see as many people as possible next month and in months to come. And I really want to thank you both and all of you for your generosity in sharing your thoughts, feelings, and artistry tonight.
Thank you so much, Nina.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks,
All right.
Phil.
Good night, all.
Good to see everybody. Peace to you.
Yeah.
Be well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Take care. Hey, Nina, thanks for letting me be part of what you're curating over time. It's really a wonderful series. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was
Carmen, I look forward to your reading. I hope I don't have something in conflict that night, but I'm looking forward to it. All right. And thanks again, Bill, for helping manage things behind the scenes. Much love to everybody. Take care.